Good afternoon and welcome to H3TV, where we gather with you every week to talk about disruption. How do we deal with disruption without letting us defining us? Wow, Monday morning, marvelous Monday morning to you, my favorite day of the week, a clean slate to start all over. So I'm Annie Meehan, a keynote speaker, consultant, and a national award-winning author. But I started coming to you in 2020 with H3TV and trying to help people figure out, how do we deal with disruption without it dealing with us? How do we still stay hopeful, healthy, and happy? And as I was getting ready for the show today, I was laughing because I was remembering 2020. I have a speaker friend and we were talking about getting ready for a virtual show. And we were saying, we wonder if anyone else before a virtual presentation puts on a little perfume or cologne. And as I got ready today, I just spritzed myself a little bit and I was thinking, just that little mentally preparing, emotionally preparing, putting great fragrance and energy out into the world affects how we interact with people, whether it's through a screen or on a stage or one-to-one, face-to-face. So I'm so glad you're here. Remember that anytime throughout our little chat today, feel free to ask questions, leave comments. We love hello and where you're from, let alone ask us anything as we go through. And I promise myself or my guest will respond. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing my friend, Orly. Please help me welcome her to the stage. Good morning, Orly. How are you?
Hi, Annie. It's so nice to see you. I know we've known each other virtually for about 3 years through our Innovation Women Connection. So my name is Orly Ziwi. I'm the founder of Ziwi Brands. I'm also the author of the book, Ready Launch Brand, the Lean Marketing Guide for Startups. And I'm also an author, lifelong educator, and I like to call myself a facilitator of light bulb moments. I have one superpower. I make fuzzy clear. I help entrepreneurs and business leaders clarify and communicate their zone of genius so they can attract more of their ideal clients and grow their business.
Awesome. So working on brand and clarity. And where do you live, Orly?
So I'm in Bryn Mawr, right outside of Philadelphia, greater Philadelphia area.
Nice. Very nice. I always like to know where people are from because I have friends all over the world and they end up saying, hey, I live there. I know someone. So
Great.
I like to always start with, what do you think of? When I say the word disruption, what comes to mind? What pops into your head?
So many things. Where to begin, Annie? Where to begin?
Well, the basic definition of that word.
So for me, it's taking you, so we have an idea of what we want to do, and we start on a path, and then something happens that can take us off our path, but create a different path that we hadn't even thought of that could end up actually be a better one. Yeah. So I try to think of disruption more as it could be a reset. It could be, some big life change. I mean, I'm thinking of when I had my children. Having children is a huge disruptor, but in the best sense of the word. And since I just came off of Mother's Day and my kids arranged a whole day with me and made dinner reservations and, without me asking anything, which was the best part. And, and so, for me, the disruption has really been to become a better human.
I like it. My first book I wrote in 2015 was called Past Detours and Possibilities. And it kind of shows a path, but then it shows these detours because life happens. Sometimes we choose the disruption. Sometimes it happens to us. Is there a specific disruption professionally or personally that you've gone through that impacted your life or that's on your mind and you'd be willing to share for our listeners?
Getting breast cancer was definitely a disruptor. And, it's interesting because when you go through a health event like that, you have a couple choices. You can, the why me kind of thing, right? Or you can find something like, for me, it's really, I realized that I had been isolating myself and I reached out and built a community, found people who supported me through this whole thing. And I have to say that it really kind of softened the edges, having kids definitely softens the edges, but having a health event like that where you have no control over it, the only thing you have control over is how you deal with it. Right. And it definitely, it slowed things down in terms of what I was planning to do. I had planned to write a book and start speaking, when all this happened in 2009. But I'm a better speaker and did a better job as an author as a result of going through this very humbling experience, I would say.
Yeah. I have 4 friends going through breast cancer right now. My mother's a breast cancer survivor, 36 years. But the woman that inspires me to do the work I do is named Nicole Johnson. And she does, she's a dramatist. So she speaks with a lesson, but with performance as well. And one of my favorite, she has many, but one of my favorite presentations by her is called Stepping into the Ring by Nicole Johnson. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not, but is that a book? That sounds like a book I should read.
Well, it is a book. It's a video.
Oh, it's a video.
Video.
Is it a TEDx talk?
Nope, it's not. It's just her. She's a woman of faith, woman speaker. She used to be, but it's about boxing and it's about the diagnosis of cancer. And so I have 4 friends going through breast cancer right now and a couple of other cancers. And I think it is like you can't control the diagnosis, but you can control how you deal with it and how you navigate it and what it brings out in you. And so when we think about you being diagnosed 2009, did you say you were diagnosed? Yeah. I'm so glad you're a survivor. Is how did you stay hopeful, especially in the initial diagnosis that can be so hard? What did you do, Orly? And you kind of already answered this question that you created community, but what are some things you did to kind of stay hopeful? Did you have a strategy or ideas around that?
I would not say I have strategy because no one has a strategy for dealing with cancer. But what I did do is, first of all, I reconnected with, with friends and people in my community, especially. And I think I definitely went in a very spiritual direction, which I think a lot of people do. And so one of the things that I did, which to this day, I almost start crying thinking about it. I asked people, so I'm part of a synagogue, and I reached out to people who were just amazing, by the way. I mean, I had known, people brought me food, people took me to doctor, all of that. People showed up. I mean, every chemo appointment, I had at least 4 people who came with me. I had a line of people coming to visit me in the hospital. What I found so amazing is that it reminded me that I have so much love and support in my life. And there's all these people who really care about me. And, it's almost like, they say, well, if you had a funeral, but you're still alive to see what people think of you, it kind of felt a little bit like that. So a friend of mine actually put together a healing circle. This is in August. Okay. So there's like the dead of summer and people showed up, and I had maybe 12 or 15 people, which is amazing to have this many people. And each person wrote what they loved about me and gave me a slip of paper, which I took I still have them to this day. I took them with me in the operating room. Like I have them with me. And, I did all kinds of visualizations and, told my, and as it turns out, my whole surgical team was women. And I asked each of them to, kind of think about best outcomes and bring, it was almost like everyone was pulling together to make sure that I came through this with the utmost love, support, and best possible outcome. And it was an incredible thing.
Beautiful. I've done the breast cancer walk many times on Mother's Day, but I've also done the 3-day for breast cancer walk. And with 4 older sisters, 5 of us being women, my mom's first 5 kids were women, girls, whatever, ladies, very close to my heart, right? I'm always conscious of it. And I do think, Orly, you did have a strategic plan. You maybe didn't have it in place before, and probably rarely people do, but you did. And one thing, as my friends go through it, some are very focused on the medical and some very focused on the diet and what they eat, and some very focused on the spiritual. But one thing you said about how you stayed hopeful, and I was speaking with a friend this morning, we were talking about how much we love to raise money or to get people to be generous with their time, with their money, with their resources. And we were talking about it's really not selfless of us because it's selfish, because there is such joy in watching people be generous. And I think you allowed people, as much as it was a gift for you that people showed up and did a spiritual circle with you and wrote to you and were with you in prayer and in belief of healing. I think you really allowed people to the gift of generosity, because I think sometimes, and and I think people, men and women, do this. We're like, I got it. I got it. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. But really, you're stealing an opportunity for people to be empathetic, compassionate, generous, and the joy that they will receive in serving. And I'm not saying it's easy to be a caretaker by any means. I'm just saying there is a joy, especially in creating a circle, a community around you of hope and believing in and asking for what you need. You know, I also often talk to people about be an advocate for yourself or get an advocate, especially in your medical, to go to the medical team that was all women and say, hey, I want to hear the best outcome. I don't want to hear the worst. I don't want to live in fear. I'm going to live in hope and belief that I'm going to heal and be better. And so the second part I like to ask people, Orly, is in the midst of that, how did you stay healthy? Now, a lot of people think of health as just the physical aspect, but for me, owning gyms for those 12 years, I recognize physical is a small part, but there's also financial health in the midst of a medical crisis, spiritual health, emotional, mental, relationship health. You talked about already, reaching out to people, not being so isolated. And that is so passionate for me right now, is that we need community. And we are getting more and more isolated. I don't need you. I got my headphones. I got my phone. I got my computer. No, we do need you. We need each other. So how did you stay healthy? And in your career, in the midst of the diagnosis and the treatment, what were some of the keys that you used to stay healthy in any of those 7 areas?
So one of the things I didn't mention, so I was a single parent. I raised my children, pretty much single-handedly while I was going through all this. So I had people step up to help me with my kids. I had the other thing that really stands out is this idea that I had people who did different tasks for me, right? So I had somebody who helped me fill out all these forms to get financial support, because breast cancer is very well funded, but it's a lot of paperwork. And so knowing that was being taken care of, and I had somebody who was doing all of that, I think definitely having people with me at each stage of this and asking for help. One of the things, like you said, and that really resonates with me, is what people said to me is, it felt like a gift for me to be able to help you. And it's something I never thought, because I've always been really strong, being a single parent, you can imagine raising 2 kids. But it occurred to me that, this was the lesson that I got from this, was being alone is not the goal. Being in community, being able to reach out to people, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which I think is something that's very hard for some of us. Certainly for me, it was really hard. Because, as you know, Annie, you're like this too. We're really strong. There's no doubt that we can do all this by ourselves. But the question is why? Why do it all by yourself when, like you said, you're literally taking away this gift that when people, and the woman who, by the way, who organized the healing circle, she said for months that space was like a holy space for her. Yeah, it was really, it's kind of amazing. Yeah, I mean, I still tear up when I think about it. Yeah.
Because it's so beautiful. And it's like in the midst, this is my whole thing, is like in the midst of disruption, if we stay open, there's a ton of gifts. Sometimes we're not ready to receive the gifts, or sometimes we're too pissed off, or we're too scared, or we're too sad, or we're too all the things. But I have been a single mom. I was raised by a single mom. I always say to my husband, I don't need you. I'm glad I want you, because I can do all things. Like I can run a business, I can buy a house, I can do this, but I want you in my life. And I love having a partner, but I am fiercely independent. And it is a gift when people say, okay, get your teammates to do this and get your employees to do this. I mean, I have 5 people that surround me and that do some work for me in my business, but I do 90% of my work because I am so driven. So sometimes it's a great reminder to it's okay to let people support us physically, financially, emotionally, to not have to be Wonder Woman all the time. Take off the cape, take a deep breath. And when I travel, then I'll come home and I'm just like, I'm going to isolate. People are like, isn't it easy for you? You're such an extrovert. But we all need downtime and we all need support. And so I love that, Orly. I think it was like the gift of a reminder that you don't have to be Wonder Woman, the gift of the reminder that people do love and want to be there for you, and the gift that you give them in return by allowing them to care for you. How about happy? I'm such a believer that a laughter truly is the best medicine, and humor and happiness. So how have you, or did you, during that really scary and sad and unknown, especially as a single mom with 2 little kids, how did you find humor or happiness in the midst of that?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't think I've really asked myself that. So I need a moment here. I think just talking to people and asking them, one of the things I will tell you is I made a point of telling people, please don't tell me about people who've died. I do not want to hear about it. Thank you very much. People, one of the things I will tell you that people do, and this is, I think there is actually a book, what not to say to people when they're going through cancer. And one of them is, don't tell me about people who died. Don't tell me that it's going to be okay, because you don't know. And don't tell me things like, oh, but you have such beautiful hair. How sad that you're going to lose it. Yeah. And so, you know how I laughed? I made a list of all those crazy things that people said. And it was just like, in what universe would that be okay? And one of the things I finally realized is all I need you to do is just be there and listen. I don't need you to, there's nothing to fix. I have an amazing team. I mean, this is Philadelphia, we have Penn, we have like amazing cancer research. I mean, this is, if you're going to get cancer, getting it in a city like Philadelphia where there's unbelievable. So, and I have amazing, to this day, I have amazing, just amazing team. And just tell me happy things, right? Don't tell me all that, because people have this, they feel, I think what happens is when you tell somebody this, the kind of the knee-jerk reaction is they either want to say something like to help, they want to fix it, they want to share it, they want to say, oh, they want to talk about, how terrible something else happened or somebody they knew. That's not helpful. And what it taught me, I will say this, Annie, it taught me that when people in my circle, right, have had health issues or there's something going on, my first response is to say nothing, is to just listen and be present, because that is the real gift that you give someone when they're going through something like this.
Yeah. I learned a new word after the hurricane. I was like, why, when people call me and ask me how I am, do they tell me these horrific things when I can't even handle? And my daughter said that's called trauma dumping. And it's really a way to relate. And and she said, well, she didn't really say this, but we talked like giving them grace, give them grace. And because their intention is good. Right. And I want to relate to a story, which I was just reading about being neurodivergent. It is normal to go, that happened to you. Well, guess what happened to me? Well, that happened to him. And because our brain is wired to go to the negative, Orly, that happened to someone I know. And this is what happened. And and you're like, stop. But having those healthy boundaries, Orly, to know, first of all, I'm going to write it down and laugh at it. I love that. Second of all, I'm going to say thank you. Like I had to learn, I couldn't talk to people for a while after the hurricane, because even the best intended people, like I was shutting down. And I would do my Facebook Lives just to kind of keep people informed that were asking me, but I couldn't receive anyone else's pain in that moment. And I love also that you said, I didn't like people to tell me I was going to be okay. And I remember that too, thinking, I hope I will be okay, but nobody knows how it plays out. And there's a difference between being safe and being okay. And I'm following the process to move forward, but I actually have no control over the outcome. And I think that's what you were, just aware and trusting the people that you did trust, and then being able to shut down the rest. So Orly, I was thinking about, I know, unfortunately, I have listeners that have cancer and that may be diagnosed or may be waiting on a diagnosis right now. Two things, kind of your younger self, but more your pre-cancer self. What do you wish you knew then? What do you wish someone would have told you or poured into you? You've already given us some good nuggets, but is there anything else that you would say to yourself in 2008, before you knew cancer would be part of your story? What do you wish someone would have said that you can say to encourage our listeners?
That's a good one. I think that and I will tell you, this is one of the big lessons. Stop worrying about little stuff. Little stuff doesn't matter. In fact, I let go of all little stuff once I went through cancer. It's like, who cares about any of those things? Now it's like, I'm alive. Yeah. I got to see my kids grow up, which, there could have been a time when I thought maybe I wouldn't. Loving my children, and letting them see this, while also knowing that I was going to be okay. Because I knew from the beginning I would eventually be okay. And I said to them, but it's not going to look like I'm okay. So I just want you to know that ultimately, yes, I will be okay, but it's going to suck for a really long time. And I think with kids, one of the things I learned is kids can handle things. What they can't handle is silence and not knowing and creating in their own minds what they think might happen. So, being open with my children, allowing them to see, I have a very good friend who's an artist, and she does portraits, and she did portraits of both my kids, but she also did a photograph of me with no hair, fully accessorized, makeup, the whole thing, with my kids. And I still have that. And I wanted to commemorate it, so turns out, by the way, just in case you're wondering, I have a perfectly shaped head. Who knew? So that was that's why the person who shaved my head said, wow, you have like a perfectly shaped head. I'm like, oh, thank you.
I'll take that compliment.
Positive,
Exactly.
I got a very cool wig, people would say, oh, your hair looks beautiful. I was like, it's a wig, but anyway. And obviously it grew back actually better than it was before. So when people say to me, wow, you have beautiful hair, I said, yeah, it was the most expensive haircut I ever got.
I think I'm also learning. I mean, sometimes naivety, you just don't know. So many people are going through so many things, but somebody told me recently more than 50% of women that you see are wearing wigs. And I was like, really? And they said, yep, alopecia, cancer. There's other diseases as well that can and stress can make your hair fall out. Pregnancy can make your hair fall. So many different things, or post-pregnancy, postpartum. So about 50% of women are wearing wigs. And I'm like, wow. I always get jealous of other women's hair. In fact, I once said, I want hair like Jessica Simpson to the hairdresser. And she said, that's not real, right? Like I'm like, how does her hair so long and then it's so short? And they're like, those are wigs and extensions. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm just naive. I was at a wedding once and I was in the bathroom and all the bridesmaids told me this is all extensions. And I was like, I don't know. I had two wigs before I moved that were more for dress up or for costumes, but I don't have any wigs anymore. Yeah. Anyway, who knows? Maybe someday I'll be wearing a wig. But one thing you said, I think, Orly, that's really, really important. And this is to our listeners before their disruptions, during their disruptions, diagnosis, whatever that is. And I love that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And then in the small print, it is all small stuff. Like when people say to me, I'm worried people are going to judge me, or I'm worried this is going to happen, or I'm worried that's going to happen, I always say, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. I'm always saying, people are going to judge you. Don't worry. They're going to. Just get over it. Who cares? Who cares what they all think? Who cares what all the things that we waste time and energy on? And one thing I know, Orly, is I was talking to a woman earlier today about insurance and about disability and death benefit. And she was saying, everybody takes life for granted. And I say, oh, I've never taken life for granted. I've lost too many people too young. Yeah. But it does, when you've gone through hard, you do appreciate everything. And you do have a different perspective on, like, that's no big deal. Like, that's not worth sweating over. Move on. There's something better waiting, whatever. So I love that. Orly, I want to know, what have you done to help another individual, whether it be with their brand or with their overcoming or giving back to cancer? What have you done because of this pain and disruption you've walked through? How have you used it to serve others?
So first of all, I donated my wig when I was done with it to the breast cancer center at Bryn Mawr Hospital. I also wrote a little guide of all the holistic and integrative medicine that I did while I was going through cancer. So including meditations and acupuncture and homeopathy. I mean, I tracked all of that. And so whenever somebody tells me someone is going through breast cancer, I always offer it. They don't always take me up on it because not everybody is open to it, but it was amazing, including nutrition. I mean, all of it. So, I've thought about, like, maybe eventually I might publish it, but it's not for, I'm an author, so yeah, I could do that, but it's more of just like my gift, like paying it forward and helping people. So I do that. And then, as you know, I'm in process of writing a book for women entrepreneurs, and it's the working title is the Guide to Female Entrepreneurs or Entrepreneurship. I think I'm moving around, like I'm still trying to figure that. You know how that
That's
goes.
why it's called working. Yes,
That's right. It's a working title. But what I'm doing, and by the way, and thank you for being gracious and being willing to be interviewed. I thought I was going to interview 25 seasoned women entrepreneurs to get their stories. I'm looking at 40, which is mind-blowing to me. And I just had one right before I got on the call with you, and for me, that is how I'm paying it back in a big way, to really elevate the voices of these incredible women that people don't even know exist. I mean, yes, in your circle, people know who you are, but I want everybody to read these, and they're not, the stories will be integrated within each chapter. That's kind of what I'm working on now. I've got it. It's starting to come together in this really nice, well, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
It's coming together in this really nice way about kind of these snippets and how they're helping to tell the story of women, and the key things that I know as a woman entrepreneur myself. But for me, that this book, that's kind of my big pay it forward, and big, because it's I mean, yes, I'm in it because I'm writing it. I'm going to be sharing some of my own story, but the fact that I can elevate all these amazing women's voices is just, it's just over. I mean, I can't even tell you how much I'm loving doing that.
I love that. Orly, I feel like, unfortunately, somebody's going to listen to this that's just diagnosed and just taking that hit, right? Like sometimes it's just, unfortunately, I know so many people that I end up knowing people with lots of things, right? What do you want to speak into that person that's listening right now and they're saying, Orly, it may be cancer, it may be some other diagnosis, or it may be someone they love that's diagnosed. What's a bit of encouragement you want to give to that person that's feeling a little overwhelmed at this moment?
Well, first of all, being overwhelmed, sad, crying, all those are all normal things. I would not, sometimes I think as women, we try to be too strong, and we try to say, I'm going to be fine. And, I had small children. I mean, my kids were 6 and 9 at the time. And it was really hard for them. And so I kind of put on a stronger face to help them deal with it. But I would say that the one thing is, don't be afraid to let people see that you're hurting, because we have a tendency, and I'm speaking for myself, to sort of hide it, or to say, no, I'm going to be, you're not okay. You're not okay. And that is okay. The other thing I would say, and a friend of mine just went through stem cell transplant, was just unbelievable. And she's doing great, by the way, which is amazing to me. And what the advice I gave to her, which she, like, this is like 3 years later now, and she's like, this is the best advice I ever got, which is, don't worry about other people. This time is for you. All the niceties, all the, I got all these cards. I never responded to any of these cards. That's not the point. People aren't sending you cards because they are expecting you to write back. They're sending it to you because they want you to know that you're in their thoughts and prayers, and they care about you. And so the gift for me, to her, really was, let all that go. It's all about you right now. It's all about you. And so for people listening, for women listening who are diagnosed with breast cancer, let all that go. You don't owe anybody anything. This is all about you, and it's okay. Like, just embrace it, and just don't worry. No one is, no one's going to be judging you. And if they are, they're not your friends. So let them go anyway.
That's great. I remember after I did get a lot of cards, and I'm so grateful to everyone that sent those during the hurricane, which we continue to recover from 20 months later. But I remember wanting to send everybody thank yous, and I just could not do it. I was so overwhelmed. So that's great advice, because I think you're in survival mode.
Exactly.
You're not okay. I'm like, okay, I'm safe. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not thinking well. And I so appreciated people that said, don't do that, Annie. You don't have to do that. So that's great advice, Orly. I really love that. Okay, Orly. So I know our listeners are going to want to reach out to you. I love the idea of you sharing, if that's a PDF or whatever. I always think whatever we can do use every resource you can to be healthy and whole, and listen. And my favorite massage therapist is half Eastern medicine and half Western. And she's like, the collaboration of the two is what's brilliant. We got to use our diet. We got to use meditation. We got to use medicine. We got to use whatever you have. So if you want to share a link to that or have one in the comments, I would love that. But I know our audience is going to want to connect with you, learn more about you, especially about your book on women in entrepreneurship and just elevating and celebrating those women. And I love what you said, like, my kids joke because my daughter, if I go out in public and people recognize me, it's not her favorite. She's like, oh my gosh. But my son's like, you're famous, Mom. Like, people know you. It's so cool. So I just think it's funny. There's so many amazing people in the world that we don't know about. And without the right marketing, without the right brand, it's hard to get found. Even if you're brilliant, you got to be able to be brilliant and be found. So what's the best way, Orly, for our listeners to connect with you?
Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, because I post at least once or twice a week.
Okay.
And I'm posting now. I have all these posts that are going to be related specifically to this new book, and sharing things that I'm learning, which I'm absolutely loving. I just did a poll, and over 600 people viewed it, and I got 24 votes. I mean, this is like amazing to me, right?
Yeah.
To have this much engagement, because I have about 2,700 connections. So anyway, yeah, that would be the best way, because then you could follow me, please do connect with me, follow me, and then you can, kind of watch the progress of this book as it's progressing. I'm sharing my vulnerability about not knowing everything, and about discovering, along with you, discovering these amazing things about women entrepreneurs.
I love also, like, I hope as you bring it out, like, different women have different quotes, because I love to quote other, like, look at this piece of brilliance and look at this. And I was interviewed for a podcast once, and this guy was like, oh, I spent a week like watching all your videos, like reading all your posts. And I was like, wow, because he knew so many things. And he's like, oh, I do a really detailed kind of investigation. And then he was repeating my quotes, and I was really impressed. I was like, wow, that's super kind. And he's like, well, I want the audience to know the value, kind of like what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of brilliance in our world, but we don't always know about it unless somebody highlights it. So, well, thank you so much, Orly. I hope everybody connects with you on LinkedIn. Please feel free to share any tips that you have with our listeners. And just a reminder to our listeners, you can question, you can comment, myself or Orly, anytime on any platform, and we will make sure to respond to you. So thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.